Hello. I would first like to thank the President's Office for inviting me to be the keynote speaker of this event. It's an honor and a milestone. 9 years ago, I was sitting where you are, and like many of you, I was making the transition from high school to college. I remember for me, I spent a lot of time thinking about my identity as a Colombian Jew and trying to find a place here for myself. For those of you who are just entering Hampshire for the first time, you'll spend the next few years of your life sharpening your academic and intellectual skills, to challenge your point of view, to experience many new things, to meet new people, and to emerge with the capacity to fulfill your true potential. And for those of you who are not just starting, I would like to welcome you back to Hampshire for this year. When I first got on campus, I met my good friend Marlem Landa. Marlem mentored me in many ways. She coached me on how to survive Hampshire, to party hard, but to always get my work done. She invited me to eat dinner at the Latino Mar and introduced me to Raíces, which is the Latino student group here in Hampshire. She also introduced me to Mary Bombardier, who works with the Community Partnership for Social Change Office, the CPSC office. I have to give credit to this amazing resource here at Hampshire for facilitating my community engagement in Holyoke, Northampton, and Amherst. I highly recommend that all students stop by this office at some point. Working voluntarily through work study or through an internship is a great way to give back to the community, to gain experience and build relationships. One of my favorite experiences was working with video vanguards in Amherst, with TK Karagashyan, another Hampshire alum. I was working with a group of youth to create media about food and health. We spent half the time talking about nutrition and the other half talking about video production. TK helped me out with the more technical aspects that I was unfamiliar with. And she also offered me much guidance to improve my professional skills. In the second semester of my Division I, I took Black and Latino politics at Mount Holyoke College with Professor Preston Smith and UMass Professor Agustin Lamontes. We were doing research in local communities where Black and Latino political partnerships had, on a local level, formed and tried to determine if Blacks and Latinos could come together and create a more national-based political alliance as a basis for community organizing. For the final project, we worked in cohorts, and my group focused on Manhattan as a community. Ultimately, we found that forming a political alliance based on race and ethnicity alone was probably going to be unsuccessful. However, we did find that there were numerous areas, including issues of public health, that could bring communities of color together to do community organizing. Throughout the course of my Division II, I kept asking myself the question, why so many communities of color were suffering from such high levels of diabetes, hypertension, and cardiovascular disorders. One Hampshire course in particular that gave me the opportunity to research this more deeply was Race, Science, Disease in Tropical America, taught by visiting Professor Jose Amador de Jesus. In his class, we examined a variety of debates over race and disease since the introduction of slavery to the Americas, particularly in the tropical region that developed plantation-based agriculture. Food has always played a key role in oppression, from the Spanish chopping down mamey trees to control the Mayas and colonize the Americas, or the Nazis only allowing 181 calories per Jew in the Warsaw Ghetto, or using the school lunch program as a means to homogenize the ethnic minorities of the United States in the 1950s. My committee chair, Deb Martin, linked me up with the National Science Foundation study being conducted by herself and Margaret Cirillo in Cuernavaca, Mexico, to examine the nutritional impact of free trade, not fair trade. Data aside, it was the stories communities members were sharing with me that helped to shape my sense of food justice. Cuernavaca, the city of the eternal spring, was becoming polluted. NAFTA allowed many multinational corporations to set up shop and dump their waste without regulation into rivers that had once been clean enough to drink from. Rural farmers were being put out of business because they could no longer compete with the subsidized farmers and the cheap prices of American corn. I came to the conclusion that we needed a major cultural shift on a community level around our relationship with food as a means to solve many of these problems. By the time I reached my final year, I was overwhelmed with the many impacts of food injustice. I wanted to examine a phenomenon that was related to nutrition that I could see among my college friends, and that had a connection to media. I spent a good month ripping up magazines and categorizing advertisements. I decided to study bodybuilding sports supplements marketed towards young men. My Div 3 was a literature review of scientific data on what these supplements were, what they did, how effective they were, and then I compared their advertisements to World War II Nazi and Allied war propaganda. The research itself helped me to develop a critical eye for how advertisers use the concept of racial superiority and messages of war to sell these products. But the process of completing my Division 3 taught me how to run the world. My committee, Professors Cindy Gill and Elizabeth Conlisk, helped me to create and stick to a timeline, to synthesize information, to coordinate multiple projects simultaneously, and to develop my communication skills. All of these skills have served me immensely in my life after Hampshire. I want to make something clear. When I graduated from Hampshire in 2008, I didn't have a plan. I had worked with video vanguards at Amherst Community Television during my Div 2 and decided to return to volunteer with them a few days a week after graduating. After talking with Jim Lescott, the executive director, about my focus of nutrition here at Hampshire, he recommended a community organizing job in Holyoke with the Food and Fitness Policy Council. The Food and Fitness Project was a cutting-edge 10-year project funded by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, located in 9 cities across the country. The goal was to improve health in communities through policy change. There was a special focus on communities of color to organize through relationships and build access to healthy food and physical activity. I got the job and did community organizing through Nuestras Raíces. And that part-time organizing job turned into a full-time organizing job. And that full-time organizing job turned into the director of youth programs. And now I'm the assistant executive director of Nuestras Raíces. Now let me back up for a minute because some of you probably just arrived to Western Mass and I'm referencing things you guys aren't familiar with yet. Holyoke is a small city built for around 120,000 people, but has a population of around 40,000. And is located south of Northampton, or approximately a 30-minute drive from here at Hampshire. To clarify, Mount Holyoke College is located in South Hadley, and Holyoke is located across the river, just over the bridge from the school. It was one of the first planned industrial cities in the country, and generates around 20% of its electricity through a hydroelectric dam. It used to be the capital of the paper manufacturing industry. It was built on a hill with factories and tenement houses at the bottom where the workers lived. And the workers, when this city was being developed, were mostly Irish immigrants. And Mary Beth Fahey, who works at the president's office, reminded me that this is another example of food injustice. The Irish potato famine, where the farmers suffered from disease in their potatoes, but it was really the English who was forcing the Irish to give up all of their food, and so they suffered a massive famine, and they moved from Ireland to Holyoke. At the top of the hill are many old Victorian houses where mainly the owners and the managers, mostly English, where they lived. As the industry moved south and overseas, Holyoke's economy crumbled and left the newest population of Puerto Ricans with very few job prospects. It compares to Flint or Detroit, Michigan, in terms of its economic experience. Nuestras Raíces is a grassroots organization that promotes human, community, and economic development through projects related to food, agriculture, and the environment. It sprang up originally as a community garden in 1991. There had been other gardens in Holyoke, but each one was short-lived as the land was being developed into public housing. Seth Williams, a Hampshire student at the time, came to Holyoke to build relationships with the community members who were interested in starting a new garden with the goal to sustain it for the long term. The product of his Div 3 was La Finquita Garden, which means the little farm. When Seth graduated and left the area, the members of La Finquita, they continued with the garden and formed Nuestras Raíces as a nonprofit entity to protect the garden. They had a vision to build a greenhouse in South Holyoke, a neighborhood with high crime and a lot of pollution. In the year 2000, they finished that greenhouse and the construction of our offices. That same year, our current executive director, Hilda Roque, started as an administrative assistant. They then set their sights on opening a farm. In 2005, they opened a 30-acre farm, community farm, which was a partnership with the trustees of reservations. In 2010, we launched an energy efficiency enterprise to generate sustainable revenue for the organization. And it also hired 19 young people from our program. We are about to finish our current strategic planning process. Our strategy for the next 3 years is to increase the impact through gardening that cultivates food and cultivates social justice. Over the last 21 years, we've turned vacant lots into 9 community gardens and continue to support the members in these gardens. The Nuestras Raíces community gardens produce food, but the greatest impact is not on hunger. It is on health, longevity, mental and emotional wellness, as well as building trust in the community. The gardens create vibrant live social networks for many residents who do not have access to land. They practice self-determination in an 8 by 12-foot plot. Don Heriberto, a charismatic gardener who has been 71 for the past 12 years, told us that he would jump off a bridge if we took away his land. That was by far the most dramatic way I've heard it, but the message is consistent. The land helps them to live and keeps them alive. These little gardens each have their own culture and perform social justice in their own ways. Doña Julia used her garden to support public safety. Her garden sits adjacent to her building where she lives. It used to be a vacant lot, and she convinced the mayor to give her the land, and she turned it into a garden. On the other side of where her building is a playground, and in between the playground and her building is an alleyway. And in Holyoke, the alleyways are a pretty big problem because nobody owns the entire alleyway. So back when Julia was starting her garden, there was a lot of police chases through this back alleyway. And as kids were crossing from the building to the playground, it always put them at risk of getting hit. She went back to the mayor and asked to extend her garden over the alleyway to block off that route so the police could no longer chase cars there. And the mayor granted her that favor, and she extended her garden over the alleyway. And now we have more land to cultivate, but also it's providing us safety for little kids who are crossing to the playground. One of our most dedicated gardeners is Sonia Gonzalez. This past year, she led an organizing effort to halt a demolition of the first public housing complex ever built in the nation, which is also her home. She got the city to pay for a renovation study that included expanding her raised bed garden into a larger in-ground garden. Don Alberto, who coordinates El Girasol Garden, that means the sunflower, rocks a gray mohawk and Ray-Ban sunglasses. He invites kids from the neighborhood into his garden to pick apples and grapes. The kids love to help him plant seeds and pick weeds, and he sings Calle 13 songs at the top of his lungs. Don Alex, an 81-year-old farmer, cultivates a special kind of sweet pepper from the Caribbean that is the most sought-after crop in the summertime. Folks in the community use it to make sofrito. Sofrito is kind of like a Puerto Rican pesto that gets used to flavor rice and meat and basically all kinds of food. It's the relationships that serve as the safety net for this community. When something happens, I usually find out about it first in the gardens because news spreads there so fast. My friend Lanny, a Hampshire alum and former Hampshire staff, helped me to edit the speech and suggested I spend a little bit of time telling you about some of the exciting things I've done, so here goes. Through my work with Nuestras Raíces, I have traveled across the country to do food justice workshops in Oakland, Lexington, Kentucky, Seattle, East Lansing, Michigan, Philadelphia, Miami, Baltimore, San Antonio, Detroit, Phoenix, Milwaukee, New York, Burlington, Boston, New Orleans, and at the CLPP Conference for Reproductive Rights here at Hampshire. I've also been working with foundations, government agencies, and other organizations to strengthen the regional food system. I'm also the vice chair for Co-op Power, which is a clean energy cooperative that has a racial and class equity mission. In the next few years, our goal is to launch new businesses, create more jobs for unemployed people, cut carbon emissions through the creation and development of clean energy products, and strengthening the grassroots environmental justice movement. One business in particular I'm excited about is Northeast Biodiesel, which will produce biodiesel from recycled vegetable oil collected throughout the region from restaurants. We already have our processor in the ground and are starting to generate some revenue as we try to finance the business. The members of Co-op Power have already committed to raising $750,000 through member loans and investments to the project and believe in the business model. Using industrial food byproducts in creative ways is a whole new realm of food systems work for me. Food justice is a part of my identity in almost the same way that ajiaco, a stew from Colombia, is, or matzah, a Jewish cracker, is, or arroz con gandules, which is a typical Puerto Rican rice with pigeon peas, can be. I started my journey looking at my plate, forming questions and looking for answers. I'm at a place now where food justice is about building a table for people to bring their plates and sit together, to eat, to make jokes, to talk in refranes, which are cultural sayings, to listen, to smile, and to be hospitable. That is the way to build trust. And trust is what we need. I'm not sure we need more leaders. I really think that what we need to do is build more trust in each other. Leading is not to convince someone that you have all the answers, but showing other people you'll be by their side. That you'll be there to help them out when they're editing video in the middle of the night and they need a snack break. Or if they invite you over for some bacalao con berenjena, that you'll show up and eat it, even if you don't know what that means. That you don't rely on a business suit to articulate your power or disregard attention to cosmetic detail because you don't think it's important. You never know where someone will end up. And I'm grateful for all the time the people I've mentioned in this speech and those who I didn't have time to mention spent helping to guide me. Basically, what I'm trying to say is be humble, be responsible, and dedicate substantial time to building relationships with each other and with everyone else in the Hampshire community and beyond. You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. Thank you.